Is Jesus the true prophet or Muhammad? Now, there are 4 criteria that the Bible gives for prophethood, and you need to go through each one of these 4 criteria. And it's very clear when you do that, you will see that Muhammad fails on all 4 counts. Number 1, a prophet must be in the prophetic line. We see that in Genesis 17, Genesis 22, Galatians chapter 4. Is Muhammad in that prophetic line? And of course, every Muslim knows no, he's not in that prophetic line. He's in the line of Ishmael. How do we know that? Well, look at, we go back to the Bible again. In Genesis chapter 17, Abraham comes with that question. He comes to God. He says, what about my son Ishmael? What does God say to him? Because I love you and because I'm going to honor you, Abraham, I will bless Ishmael. He will have 12 sons, and he will be the head of 12 families. I will bless all 12 of those families. But in verse 20, he then again says, but my covenant is with Isaac. My covenant is with Isaac. So as far as God was concerned, he was going to bless Ishmael, but his covenant would always be with Isaac. In chapter 22 of Genesis, this is really firmed up, because here you have God coming to Abraham, and he asks not once, not twice, but 3 different times he asks, give me your one and unique son, Isaac. Every time he asks for his one and unique son. So what about Ishmael? One unique, but Abraham had 2 sons. Did God make a mistake here? Did Moses miswrite this? No. What God was saying here very clearly is that I do not honor Ishmael as your unique son anymore. He was he chose his words well. What he was saying is God, as far as God was concerned, Abraham only had 1 son. And that was a son he provided. Remember, Ishmael was provided by Sarah through Hagar. It was Ishmael that came out of man's own choice. It was man, in this case, a woman, who wanted to help Abraham out, and so she gave him her slave, Hagar. And that's who Ishmael came from. Now let's jump then to Galatians 4. Galatians 4, it really underlines this, because Paul then takes the same thing and he runs it through its logical conclusion. And he says, you have heard about the 2 women who represent 2 different peoples. Sarah, who represents the people of the free woman, the woman whose son was a free son, and Hagar, who represents the people, the slave woman's son. The slave woman's son from Arabia, Paul says. Isn't that interesting? That the slave woman's son is from Arabia, of where Muhammad is coming from. So he's looking at 2 different women, 2 different covenants. And what does he say? The slave woman's son persecuted the free woman's son. And he ends that chapter by saying, have nothing to do with the slave woman's son. We're to have nothing to do with Ishmael. We're to have nothing to do with Hagar. So that pretty much solidifies what God was saying in chapter 17 of Genesis and chapter 22 of Genesis. Paul then summarizes and gives the application in Galatians chapter 4. So that's the first criteria. If he's a prophet, he must come not in the slave woman's line, but in the free woman's line. Must come through Isaac. Is Muhammad in that line? 0. Absolutely not. Strike 1. Number 2. A prophet must do a prophecy or perform a miracle. Take a look and you will see categorically that when you look at Muhammad's life, he did no miracle whatsoever. 3 times the Jews asked him in the Quran to do a miracle, and his response every time was, should I do a miracle? The prophets before you did miracles and you killed them. I am nothing more than a warner. So rather than actually do a miracle to prove that he was a prophet, what did he do? He just basically sidestepped it and said, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to just warn you, to be a messenger. Did Jesus do miracles? Take a look at the Quran and see if he did miracles. Yes, chapter 3, verse 49 is probably the best one to go to. In chapter 3, verse 49, he takes some clay, makes them into birds, blows on them, and they fly up into the air. And it says in the same verse that he healed the lepers and gave sight to the blind, and he resuscitated the dead. Now, those are miracles. Not one of those miracles could Muhammad do. Proving that Jesus did miracles, Jesus did prophecy. Did Muhammad ever fulfill any prophecy? Absolutely not. Every prophet could either fulfill prophecy or do a miracle. Muhammad could do neither. Proving number 2, he strikes out. Number 3, He must have the same message. A prophet does not bring a message that contradicts other messages. God does not contradict himself. That's why it's so clear when you look at these two books. These are full of contradictions. The Bible, just take a look what the Bible says about God versus what the Quran says about God. The Quran says that God, Allah, deceives. The Bible never says he deceives. The Quran says that Allah cannot come to earth. The Bible is very clear that God can come to earth. And especially the person of Jesus Christ. The Quran says that another man took his place in chapter 4, verse 157. The Bible is very clear that Jesus died on the cross and rose again. So in every case, the Quran contradicts the Bible. God does not contradict himself. So therefore, Muhammad, if he is the author, if he's the one that gave us the Quran, he is full of contradictions. We do not accept him. Number 3. Number 4, and this is probably the most important one. Every prophet knew God's holy name, and the holy name would be Yahweh, given to Moses there in Exodus chapter 3. So Exodus chapter 3, when he was going to be told to go down to Egypt, he turned to God and says, give me your name. And that's why God gave him his name at that time. And that name is Yahweh. And that's why every time, if you look at the Old Testament, you will see the name of God is 3 different names of God that are in the Old Testament. The first one would be Elohim. Elohim is the generic name for God that's found in the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, Elohim. But take a look at that. Elohim is plural. But it's not dual. That would be Eloha. It's Elohim, which means 3 or more. Ooh, I love that. So even the word Elohim introduces a concept of divinity, of triunity right there within that word. So here is in the beginning, Elohim, 3 or more. But look at the verb that follows it. Bara, creates as one. So you have the triune God, Elohim, creating as one. Singular. Plural, yet one. Now, that word Elohim is found about 320 times in the Old Testament. It's generic. It just means the gods. The gods. The other name, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong. Scratch that. Elohim is found 2,000 times, not 340 times. It just means generic, the gods. The other name is Adonai. Adonai is found about 340 times. Adonai is nothing more than a descriptive name for God. And that's why whenever a Jew reads Yahweh in the Old Testament, they don't read Yahweh because it's such a holy name. They put Adonai there as they read it. But that's only found 340 times. Elohim is found 2,000 times, much more important. But that's still not the most important name for God. The most important name for God is Yahweh. Yahweh, that God gave to Moses there at the burning bush. Now, let me ask you this. How many times is that found in the Old Testament? 6,823 times. 6,823 times you find Yahweh in the Old Testament, showing that it's 3 times more than Elohim and 10 times more than Adonai, proving it's the most important name for God. If it's that important, then I would suggest that every prophet must know that name. And that's true. Every prophet knew that name. Every prophet used that name. Now, in our English Bible, they don't put Yahweh there. I wish they would. They just put L-O-R-D in capital letters. Anytime you see L-O-R-D in capital letters, that's Yahweh in Hebrew. And I wish they'd go back to Yahweh because there's such a confusion as to what Lord means. Now, if you come to Britain, in London, we have a House of Lords. And they're about all these senile men. That is not my God, and that should not be his name. So I don't like to use Lord. I like to use Yahweh there because it makes it so clear as to what God we're talking about. So here you have number 4. Muhammad never knew this name, never referred to this name. Look at the hadith. You will not see it on his lips at all. It is not in the Quran. It's not in the Sirah. It's not in the Tafsir. It's not in the hadith. It's not in the Tahqiq. So what about Muhammad versus God, versus Jesus? Just take a look on page 6. Look at all those references there. Now, I love to go through this because one thing I do when I'm with Muslims, I like to do a comparative between Jesus and Muhammad, and you can do this quite well yourself. Look at the comparatives. I remember I was in Dearborn, in Michigan, And there was a huge festival for an Arab festival. So I went to the Arab festival, and there was a man holding a sign, and it said, Jesus and Muhammad, we love them both. So I went up to him and I'm so glad you got Jesus above Muhammad. Make sure you keep Jesus above Muhammad. And he said, no, they're equal. I said, no, they're not. Jesus is superior to Muhammad. Your sign says so. He said, no, I didn't mean it that way. I said, no, but keep him up there because he is superior. He said, no, they're exactly the same. I said, no, let's look at your Quran. I'm going to use your Quran, and I'm going to show you just from your Quran that Jesus is superior to Muhammad in every category, every major category. And so as we were speaking, a crowd started to form, and it got pretty big. And I just started with chapter 19, verse 20. And I said, according to your Quran, Jesus was born of a virgin. So shows that at his birth that he was unique. Was Muhammad born uniquely? No, he was born from a woman named Amina. His father was Abdullah. And Abdullah died before he was born. Amina died soon after he was born. He was given to Abu Talib to be raised by his uncle. But certainly he had no miraculous birth. So already in his birth, you can see Jesus is superior. Chapter 3, verse 46, I took him to next. And I said, chapter 3, verse 46, it says very clearly that Isa, in this case, was able to talk from the cradle. Could Muhammad talk from the cradle? No, he couldn't. So already, number 2, you see where he's superior. 3 verses later, in verse 49, it says, and I referred to this earlier, it says that Isa was able to take some mud, form them into birds, blow on them, and they fly up into the air. Could Muhammad do that? Could he create from nothing? No, of course he couldn't. So he's already superior there. It says in the same verse that he gave sight to the blind, that he healed the lepers, and that he resuscitated dead. There are 3 other miracles that Muhammad could not do, but Jesus could, according to your Quran. So now we've got 6 different areas already where Jesus is superior to Muhammad in just your Quran itself. In his birth, in his infancy, and also in his adulthood. And then I end with chapter 19, verse 19. Chapter 19, verse 19, it says that Jesus, Isa, is the righteous one, the pure one, the sinless one. Was Muhammad sinless? Now, Muslims will always say, yes, he was sinless. All the prophets were sinless. I said, take a look at your Quran, see if you can support that. In every case, every one of the prophets sinned, but not Jesus. They'll say, well, Muhammad never sinned. I said, then go to chapter 48, verse 1 and 2. In chapter 48, verse 1 and 2 of the Quran, God says to Muhammad, ask forgiveness for the sins you have done and the sins you are yet to do. Even as a prophet, he continues to sin, proving that even that right through his whole life, Muhammad was a sinner, but not Jesus, not Isa. So here we've got 7 areas where Muhammad is inferior to Jesus. And then you can just look at this list that I have here on page 6. Let's just go down through them. Jesus was born of a virgin, Matthew 1. In Surah 19. Muhammad was born normally. Jesus served God as a child, whereas Muhammad was an idolater before he was a prophet. Jesus read the Bible early on, whereas Muhammad was illiterate, could not even read or write. Jesus was poor, dependent on donations, Luke 4, verse 16 to 21, chapter 8, verse 1 to 3. Muhammad took 20% of booty from others. Jesus performed miracles. Muhammad never did a miracle. Jesus made blind eyes see, as I said earlier. Muhammad made seen eyes blind, Bukhari, volumes 8, hadith number 520. Jesus made the lame to walk, Matthew 9, verse 2 to 8, whereas Muhammad made the walking lame, Al-Bukhari, 8, 520 again. Jesus healed withered hands in Matthew 12, verse 10 to 13, whereas Muhammad cut off the hands for stealing an egg in Al-Bukhari. Also, this is referred to in the Quran in chapter 5, verse 38. Jesus forgave the adulteress in John 8, 7, whereas Muhammad had adulteresses whipped and stoned, Surah 24, the verse on Rajam. Jesus raised the dead, John 11, also Surah 3, ayah 49 says that. Muhammad killed the living, Ibn Hisham, page 308. Al-Bukhari, volume 5, hadith number 248. I'm sorry, 5, volume number 369. Jesus excused his opponents in Luke 23, verse 34, and also verse 43. Muhammad had his opponents killed in Al-Bukhari, volume 1, hadith number 241. Jesus sets the condemned free in John 8, verse 1 to 11, whereas Muhammad enslaved the free in Ibn Hisham, page 466. Jesus was sinless, whereas Muhammad was sinful. You can see that especially in chapter 48, verse 1 and 2 that we just went through. Jesus died for sinners, whereas Muhammad had sinners killed. And Jesus rose from the dead, Luke 23:24. Muhammad died, was buried in Medina, and is there still. Now, I'm going to end there because I can see we're almost coming up to 2 hours. And we'll start then in 2 weeks. We'll start with number 12. So we'll start there looking at number 12. Does Jesus have two different genealogies? And we'll finish off with questions on Jesus and then go to the questions on the Bible.